Cant Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com, that is INFORMATION@CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald on Wednesday the 14th of June 2023. This is from the news section. The headline reads, Junior Doctor Strikes Scotland. Union says it's standing up for NHS. This article is by Jodie Harrison. Junior doctors north of the border are standing up for the future of the NHS by voting for strike action, the chairman of BMA Scotland has said. The union has confirmed that 3 days of strike action will take place on July the 12th to the 15th, unless an improved offer is made, after members rejected the latest pay offer. The Scottish Government offered a 14.5% pay increase over 2 years, but BMA Scotland said it was rejected by 71.1% of those who voted on a 66.3% turnout. Dr Chris Smith, chairman of the union's Scottish Junior Doctor Committee, said an improved offer would be a down payment on the future of the NHS to make sure it stays an effective health service. Dr Smith said that doctors recognise there will be disruption and that strike action is an absolute last resort. He said that consultants and specialty doctors will be covering the work of junior doctors. Dr Smith told BBC Radio Scotland's Good Morning Scotland programme, "We do recognise that appointments will be cancelled and operations will be cancelled, and that's why we've called on the government to come back with a better offer to avoid this if we can, but if not, junior doctors are clear. We are standing up for the future of the NHS, the future of our profession by taking this absolute resort of strike action." Dr Smith said that junior doctors are at the backbone of the NHS and that a better offer is needed to address years of pay erosion. Commenting on the Scottish Government's offer, he said, "Since 2008, we've had a real terms pay cut of 28.5%, so this didn't even come close to bringing us back to where we were 15 years ago. Over the 2 years, that would have entrenched the pay erosion that we've seen, and that pay erosion is partly responsible for doctors leaving the NHS in their droves. Our pay has been cut by 28.5%. We're just asking to be brought back to where we were. We're not asking for a pay rise, we just want to be back to what we were in 2008, when we think the NHS was working better and there were more doctors." He added, "It's my job to go back to the government to say we need a better pay offer, and if we don't get a better offer from you, there will be strike action from July 12th. The ball is firmly in the government's court to come back with a better offer, and we can work together to avoid strikes if we can." Asked what his message to Health Secretary Michael Matheson would be, Dr Smith said, "My direct message to the Health Secretary is please come back to the table with an improved offer that goes above inflation. An improved offer that goes above inflation and links our pay above inflation so that we don't get back into this hole. We need to dig ourselves out of the hole of pay erosion that is causing so many doctors to leave the NHS." On Tuesday, Mr Matheson said he was disappointed with the rejection, adding that strikes are in no one's interest. "I respect the outcome of the ballot. We negotiated in good faith, addressing concerns from junior doctors, but this is only the start of the journey, not the end," Mr Matheson said. "This was the biggest investment in junior doctors' pay for the last 20 years and a step forward to modernising pay bargaining, restoring confidence among junior doctors and ensuring that their contribution to our healthcare system is appropriately recognised." The article was by Jodie Harrison. This is from the Herald on Wednesday the 14th of June 2023. This is from the news section. The headline reads, Stephen Flynn tells Rishi Sunak to grow up after PM's sturgeon joke. This is by Tom Gordon. The SNP's Westminster leader has told Rishi Sunak to grow up after the Prime Minister poked fun at him and Nicola Sturgeon. Stephen Flynn also urged Mr Sunak to apologise for the cycle of misery caused by Brexit, including higher food, energy and mortgage prices. Miss Sturgeon was arrested by police investigating the SNP's finances on Sunday and questioned by detectives for 7 hours before being released without charge. The Scottish Tories and some of the SNP's own politicians said the former FM should lose the party whip either by resigning it or by Humza Yousaf withdrawing it from her. However, Mr Yousaf refused, as she had not been charged, and on Monday insisted she was still an asset to the party and the most impressive politician in Europe. It later emerged that SNP MSPs had sent Miss Sturgeon flowers as a mark of sympathy after her arrest, despite the possibility she could yet face a criminal charge. Police Scotland is looking at whether £660,000 raised by the SNP for Indiref 2 was misspent. With the Bank of England hiking interest rates to tackle stubborn inflation, mortgage rates have shot up in recent weeks and lenders have withdrawn many existing deals. The cost of some of the UK government's own borrowing via 2-year Treasury gilts also rose this week to almost 4.9%, the highest since the 2008 financial crisis. At PMQs, Mr Flynn reminded Mr Sunak that during his failed Tory leadership bid last year, he warned that Liz Truss's policies would lead to mortgage rate rises. He quoted Mr Sunak's prediction that it's going to tip millions of people into misery and it's going to mean we have absolutely no chance of winning the next election. Mr Flynn then asked, given that mortgage rates continue to rise, does he still agree with his own electoral analysis? Mr Sunak said his economic policy had made reducing inflation and thereby interest rates its number one priority, and said rates were higher in many other countries. He went on, but it is important in order to reduce inflation that you do need to have control over borrowing, which is why we, unlike the party opposite, Labour, are disciplined with regard to the public finances. But these are the issues that we should be focused on. I saw that the SNP yesterday, Mr Speaker, had a meeting to discuss their future, but the only thing they managed to decide was that they should send Nicola Sturgeon some flowers. So can he, Mr Flynn, tell us, did he sign the card? Mr Flynn replied, respectfully, I think the Prime Minister needs to grow up. He went on, there is an elephant in this here chamber when it comes to the dire economic circumstances facing the UK, and that's Brexit. The Tory benches, they don't want to accept it, and the Labour Party, they don't want to talk about it. But whether it's food prices, energy prices or indeed mortgage prices, households in Scotland are being shafted by Brexit. So can I ask the Prime Minister, will he apologise for the cycle of misery that Westminster has caused? Mr Sunak replied, while his party leader calls Nicola Sturgeon the most impressive politician in Europe, we are getting on delivering for the people of Scotland. Paying half of their energy bills, making sure that pensions rise, making sure that there's direct support for those who need it with the cost of living, and crucially ensuring that we secure over 200,000 jobs by supporting Scotland's North Sea oil and gas industry, something opposed by this party. The article was by Tom Gordon.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 14th of June 2023 from the Voices section. This article is by Gabriel Mackay. After Boris Johnson's honours list, should we bin knighthoods? There are many things about Britain that are, frankly, a little ridiculous. For example, Parliament cannot sit, debate or pass a motion unless a golden mace is present. Ed Sheeran is wildly successful, despite having all the charisma of an empty crisp packet. People continue to take seriously the opinions of Nigel Farage. Even for a country which tolerates the above, though, it was a true theatre of absurdity which played out on Friday as a former Prime Minister gave awards to loads of his mates. The current Prime Minister got a bit awkward about it, then the former Prime Minister resigned in disgrace, and all the mates he'd given awards to said he was actually great. That Boris Johnson is ridiculous should come as a surprise to no one. Indeed, it's something a man named Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, and educated at Eton and Oxford, used to portray himself as some sort of man of the people. Yes, he's got more middle names than children. Well, possibly not. But have you seen him stuck on a zip wire? And check out his hair. Reaction to the honours list was furious. In these very pages, Sir Tom Devine, Scotland's most prominent historian, decried it as a list of nonentities and said his own knighthood felt tarnished as a result. It's a fair quibble. In terms of people you don't want to find yourself in a club with, Jacob Rees-Mogg is up there with Bible John. One wonders if Ian Rankin, who received a knighthood of his own yesterday, felt the same. The honouring of Rees-Mogg and Priti Patel in particular, at the behest of a former Prime Minister who was found to have lied to Parliament, seemed to draw the most outrage. By allowing the likes of Rees-Mogg, who I'm yet to be convinced isn't a long-running Sacha Baron Cohen character he'll reveal at the moment of his knighting, and Patel to be made knights and dames, the thinking goes the whole honours system is devalued and brought into disrepute. Perhaps, though, we should examine whether honours do or should hold the cachet they appear to. In Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Graham Chapman's King Arthur comes across a peasant in a field and declares, "I am your king." Scrabbling about in the mud, the woman replies, "Well, I didn't vote for you," to which Arthur recounts the tale of receiving Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. The peasant declares, "You can't expect to wield supreme power just 'cause some watery tart threw a sword at you." Thankfully, the knights who won't take the knee haven't been given any actual power by King Charles via their mate. But the scandal over their honours comes hot on the heels of a coronation many felt archaic and out of touch during a cost of living crisis. Never mind that the year is 2023. Charles may have done good work for charity and has been lauded for his work at Dumfries House in Ayrshire, but is majesty the first thing that comes to mind when beholding the monarch? Is making people knights of the realm and going around calling them sir not a bit, weird? The counter-argument to all this is that given the titles don't have any real power or benefits, it's just a nice little quirk that comes with still having a monarchy. Being given a gong is something like a graduation. It's for the parents, really. My own late grandfather was awarded an OBE for services to teaching, and to this day a picture of him, my grandmother and my late mother at Buckingham Palace hangs on the wall of the family home, beside a letter from the Queen congratulating him and his wife on their golden wedding anniversary. Both clearly have huge sentimental value, if nothing else, and in that context you can see why Michael Fabricant, a man whose primary achievement in life appears to be functioning with a dead badger permanently attached to his head, being in the same club would rub people up the wrong way. One can only imagine how David Beckham, whose brazen attempts to be recognised with a knighthood can surely only end with him whipping free kick after free kick onto the royal balcony, the footballs painted a regal purple and simply embossed in gold with the word "please," felt at seeing people skip the queue just for being pals with Boris Johnson. If Priti Patel's damehood is any guide to how terrifying psychopaths will be recognised in the future, His old teammate Roy Keane will probably beat him to the punch too. Not everyone is quite as desperate to be given a gong as golden balls. David Bowie famously turned down a knighthood, saying, "I seriously don't know what it's for. It's not what I spent my life working for." Perhaps unsurprisingly, the man who wrote The Eton Rifles, Paul Weller, opted not to accept one either, though Alex Ferguson, Billy Connolly, and most recently Mr. Rankin opted to have Sir before their name. Asked why a former ship welder would accept an award from the royal family, the big yin shrugged. "It never dawned on me to turn it down. The mood it was given in and the mood it was received in was the same. I was given for the nicest of reasons, and it was accepted for a good reason." Where honours do matter is in the House of Lords, which may have helped block some of the more draconian legislation the current government have tried to impose. But it remains an unelected House of Representatives whose occupants are chosen by their friends and who keep their positions for life. Composer Andrew Lloyd Webber once flew in on his private jet to vote to cut tax credits to poor people, which, before the Cats movie, was the worst thing he'd put his name to. Most other countries did away with knights and golden maces around the same time they discovered indoor plumbing. Perhaps Arise Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg is our cue to do the same.
This is from the Herald on Thursday the 15th of June 2023, from the news section. Heatwave in Scotland sees water usage soar as warning issued. This article is written by Gabriel Mackay. Scots have been urged to consider how they use water as reservoir levels plummet and usage spikes. The ongoing dry, hot weather has seen a 20% spike in domestic water usage, requiring Scottish Water to increase supply. The organisation said it had put in an extra 150 million litres per day over the past 2 weeks, equivalent to 75 Olympic-sized swimming pools or 1.8 million baths. As a result, average reservoir levels across Scotland are down 3% from last week to 77%. The average for this time of year is 87%, and this time last year levels were at 87%. Scots are being asked to take measures to save water, including letting grass go brown, taking shorter showers, turning off the tap when brushing teeth, using dishwashers and washing machines only when fully loaded, and using a bucket and sponge rather than a hose to wash the car. Kes Jeskowiak, Scottish Water's General Manager of Customer Water Services, said, "The dry weather has seen an increase in customer use and an additional 150 million litres of water consistently having to be distributed per day into our network. We're working hard to maintain normal supplies for all, but would again ask that customers consider how they use their water and to protect this precious resource. We believe that a large part of the additional water use is within gardens, so we would ask that customers are mindful of how much water they use in outdoor spaces such as lawns. One tip would be for customers to let their garden lawns go brown during the dry weather, because its appearance will be temporary and it will recover, but not watering lawns will help save significant amounts of water. Water is always worth saving, so we would ask everyone to do all they can in and around the home and garden to help us keep water flowing normally to their taps. By taking simple steps to reduce the volume used around the home and garden, we can make our country's water go even further." That article was written by Gabriel Mackay. This is from the Herald on Thursday the 15th of June 2023, from the news section. Joanna Cherry, police probe new death threat tweets. This article is written by Jodie Harrison. police have launched a probe into alleged death threats against an MP. SNP MP Joanna Cherry received 2 threatening tweets which the Metropolitan Police are now investigating under the Communications Act 2003. The force had previously deemed the first tweet not to have met the criminal threshold for an offence. That tweet, of which Miss Cherry shared a screenshot on Twitter, said, "I'd kill her with my bare hands if ever I saw her." I am hoping the Metropolitan Police will reconsider their decision on the criminality of the first tweet threatening to kill me in the light of the second tweet threatening not just my life, but that of 2 other MPs, Rosie Duffield and J.N. Hanvey. Miss Cherry also shared the second post from the same author, which said, in reference to her and 2 other MPs, each of them should be murdered in broad daylight on a crowded street. Miss Cherry, MP for Edinburgh South West, wrote, "I am hoping the Metropolitan Police will reconsider their decision on the criminality of the first tweet threatening to kill me in the light of the second tweet threatening not just my life but that of 2 other MPs, Rosie Duffield and Neil Hanvey." In a statement, the Met said, on Tuesday, June the 13th, the Met was made aware of a tweet received by a serving MP. The contents were assessed and it was deemed it did not meet the criminal threshold for an offence. That matter was logged for intelligence purposes. However, we have today, June the 14th, become aware of a further tweet linked to the same account, and with these being taken together, we will now be investigating this matter for potential criminal offences under the Communications Act 2003. We take the safety and security of MPs extremely seriously, and our parliamentary liaison and investigation team works with colleagues from the local police forces through Operation Bridger Network and the Parliamentary Security Department to provide MPs and their constituency teams with support and advice in relation to their safety and security. That article was written by Jodie Harrison.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 15th of June 2023, from the Voices section. Scotland's best firms show there is more to life than profits. Article by Scott Wright. Does the ownership of a company matter to the people who buy its goods and services? According to a major survey published this week, the answer is emphatically yes. Family businesses were rated as the most trustworthy by 23.5% of the Scottish public in research commissioned by the Institute for Family Business, IFB, and produced by Census Wide on the eve of a major conference in Glasgow. It put family ownership ahead of employee-owned firms, which 17% of Scottish people said were the most trustworthy, followed by venture capital-backed businesses, 10%, public limited companies, 8%, and private equity ownership, 5%. The survey found Scots believe family-owned firms look after their employees most, compared with the other types of businesses, with 30% rating them top in this measure. And more than 1/5 of respondents across Scotland associate family companies with the phrase, "have great customer service." For people au fait with the major themes in Scottish business, the findings will not come as a huge surprise. Family-owned firms have, for decades, been the backbone of the Scottish economy, a point underlined by the IFB report, which took the pulse of 2,000 respondents in May. It found there are more than 280,000 family businesses in Scotland, accounting for 84% of all companies north of the border, and employing around 874,000 people in total. Often these firms are long established, meaning that in certain instances they have provided jobs for several generations of families that are either located in rural or remote areas where the employment they provide is crucial. Examples include the historic Walker's Shortbread, which employs around 1,200 people in Aberlour, and fellow Speyside business Baxter's Food Group, an even older company and employer of around 1,100 people in production roles in Fauquebers. To this list you can add a whole host of Scottish family firms that have been linchpins of the communities they are based in for many decades, from biscuit maker Tunnocks in Uddingston to Scotch whisky producers William Grant & Sons and Ian MacLeod, which are constantly investing in infrastructure to prepare for the future. Ian MacLeod recently submitted plans to Stirling Council for a huge whisky warehouse at Bandeath Industrial Estate, Throsk. Crieff Hydro is another example of a family-owned company that's forever planning for the future. Its profits are routinely reinvested by the Leckie family to develop the range of facilities and leisure activities offered at the properties owned and managed by the Perthshire-based hotel group. Companies like these have demonstrated over the years a willingness and determination to make decisions that are designed to safeguard their businesses for the longer term, which often require major investment. While it is impossible to tell how important family ownership is to consumers when they're weighing up purchasing decisions, the research from the IFB reinforces the impression that it is a significant factor at the very least. But even long-established family firms which have prospered over generations are battling for survival right now. Steep rises in the cost of energy, labour, food and drink over the last year or so, allied to rampant consumer prices, inflation and rising interest rates, represent not just a risk to their ability to invest, but an existential threat to businesses of all kinds, including those which have been owned by families for many years. Given that backdrop, it may well be that some family firms find themselves in the crosshairs of predators, which might sense an opportunity to acquire businesses that could be vulnerable because of current trading conditions. Over recent years, a host of major Scottish companies, several listed on the stock market, have fallen to opportunistic takeover bids. And while it is by no means inevitable, such changes of ownership do not always work out for the best, with the arrival of private equity or venture capital owners often leading to cost-cutting, job losses, and headquarters moving outside the country. Of course, takeovers can work out well. Matthew Aldi, the Glasgow coffee firm founded more than 150 years ago, unveiled plans last month for a multi-million-pound investment at its production headquarters, allowing the company to roast more than 2,500 tonnes of coffee each year for customers and create 38 jobs. Interestingly, the plans have come 7 years after the business was acquired by Tchibo of Germany, in a deal likely to have been worth tens of millions of pounds. This perhaps suggests that the change of hands has been a positive experience. Staff numbers at Matthew Aldi have grown from around 220 at the time of the deal to the current headcount of 250. It would be wrong, however, to believe that all takeovers have outcomes like the Matthew Aldi experience. Takeovers all over the world are more commonly associated with uncertainty and ultimately, in many cases, a loss of employment as new owners look to make savings, which is often the driver of a deal in the first place. Scotland's finest family-owned firms have been incredibly adept at seeing off major challenges over the last 100 years, from world wars and recessions to a global financial crisis and a pandemic. But that does not mean they would not benefit from the right strategic and policy support. The IFB declared this week that a thriving family business sector is essential to a prosperous society, adding that family firms pursue sustainable and responsible models that others can learn from. In comments issued shortly before the IFB held its 3-day National Family Business Conference in Glasgow this week, the first time the event had been held in the city, Chief Executive Neil Davey said, "For too long, political, industry and business decision-making has taken a restrictive approach to investment decisions that responds to priorities of non-family businesses, PLCs, whose priority is to meet shareholder demands for short-term returns on investments. The UK needs to formulate a growth strategy that encourages and incentivises businesses to focus on longer-term investment opportunities and returns for stakeholders, the environment, and the UK's role and place in the wider world. It is a sentiment that it is hard to disagree with." And that article was by Scott Wright. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 15th of June 2023, from the Voices section, exclusive, Scotland's new foreign ownership law, does it go far enough? Exclusive by Petra Matisevich. In the UK, companies must publicly name who owns them. Not all countries impose the same requirements, however, and information about a firm's shareholders may not be publicly available in overseas jurisdictions. Some of Scotland's biggest estates, parts of the Cairngorms National Park and historic assets such as Roxburgh Hotel in Edinburgh, are owned overseas. Their owners are not publicly known. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a new UK register of overseas entities was launched, forcing some property-owning companies to name their owners. Yet several legal shortcomings allowed disclosure-bound companies to keep the names of their owners secret. Registers of Scotland sells a list of overseas companies that own Scottish land and properties. There were 3,016 properties owned overseas on this list at the end of 2021. these properties were owned by 1,578 different companies. Around half of those, 47%, were owned by companies incorporated in the Channel Islands of Jersey and Guernsey and the Isle of Man. A fifth, 20%, were registered in British overseas territories such as the British Virgin Islands, the Bahamas and Cayman Islands. All of these are considered tax havens by the Tax Justice Network. Are all overseas companies that own real estate in Scotland required to declare their beneficial owner? No. Companies that own Scottish property need only to disclose their owners if they bought the property after the 8th of December 2014. Less than half of all overseas property owning companies, 736, were required to register their owners. The owners of the rest are allowed to remain secret, although 262 disclosed their owners voluntarily. In England and Wales, the cut-off date for registration is 1st of January 1999. If the same date applied to Scotland, only 4% of companies, 71, would be exempt from disclosure. The less restrictive Scottish registration date was chosen by the UK government. The information on the origins of overseas companies owning land in Scotland is incomplete prior to 2014, when new land registration requirements were introduced. The loophole was expected to be partially closed by the Register of Controlled Interest in Land, RCI, a Scottish list of landowners where property owning overseas companies must record their holdings by the 1st of April 2024. The RCI does not have a cut-off date. However, experts said other flaws, such as a lack of verification of the information submitted to the RCI, can still allow owners to bypass disclosure. How many disclosure-bound companies have revealed their owners in the register? Only 450 companies, 38%. Adding the 262 companies that were not required to name their owners but did so voluntarily, we found 712 property-holding overseas companies in the register. Non-compliance can include a fine of £2,500 per day and a prison sentence. But a recent UK-wide investigation revealed that none of the companies failing to register their beneficial owners have yet been sanctioned. Did all registered companies name an owner? 91 companies claimed they couldn't identify a registerable beneficial owner. Companies are only required to register a person or organisation as the beneficial owner if they own 25% or more of the company. For example, if a company has 5 owners, each with a share of 20%, none would be required to reveal their identity. How about companies that did register an owner? Did they name those they were supposed to? Not all of them. A registerable beneficial owner is an individual, a government, a public body or a company already subject to transparency regime, such as a UK firm or a corporation trading shares on a European or US stock exchange. But 36 of the registered companies who claimed to have a beneficial owner did not name an eligible person. They instead named another overseas company whose ownership is not publicly known. A small number of companies, 33, named a trustee as a beneficial owner. The names of trust beneficiaries still need to be provided to the corporate registry, but their details are kept private. So what's the bottom line? Just 422, 27% of the 1,570 overseas companies that own Scottish property have revealed their true ownership. And that article was an exclusive by Petra Matijevic.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday, 15th of June 2023. Arts and Entertainments. Edinburgh Book Festival unveils 40th anniversary lineup by Barry Didcock, senior features writer. In the year it celebrates its 40th anniversary, the Edinburgh International Book Festival, EIBF, has unveiled a programme including 7 Booker Prize winners and a host of writers and personalities, among them Greta Thunberg, Judy Murray, Monroe Bergdorf, Leila Slimani, Alice Osman, Gordon Brown and both current and previous First Ministers. They will join 40 upcoming novelists in a new authors strand. There were 3 writers who attended the first book festival in 1983 and in a strand called What Makes a Writer, an all-female lineup including Scots Jackie Kay, Val McDermid and Ali Smith, alongside Bernadine Evaristo and Elif Shafak. Overall, nearly 600 live events are planned, featuring 470 participants from 49 countries. Around 100 events will be live streamed, an innovation which began when the 2020 festival was forced to cancel. The festival will be held at Edinburgh College of Art for the final time before the festival moves to its new home in the Edinburgh Futures Institute next year. The new larger venue will operate year-round, and the anticipation is it will see audiences to return to pre-pandemic levels. Unveiling the full programme in what is to be his final festival in charge, EIBF Director Nick Barley said, "We really want to enjoy the pleasure of being together in conversation, celebrating ideas and great books. We're aware out there in the social media sphere is a very toxic place. The political world is very divided, so our festival sees itself as a kind of antidote to the toxicity of Twitter. This is a place for positive, constructed, well-moderated conversation by people who will listen to each other. That doesn't mean to say it's a cosy love-in where everyone agrees, but this is a place where disagreement is carefully constructed and where people are expected to listen, possibly even change their minds." Themes around the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement and the 75th anniversary of the founding of the NHS will be tackled in dedicated strands, while Eyewitness Ukraine and Climate Positive will examine the war in Ukraine and solutions to climate change respectively. Among the other Scots in the author lineup are James Kelman, Jenny Fagan, Irvin Welsh, Jenny Colgan, Denise Mina, Chris Brookmeyer and Alexander McCall-Smith. Elsewhere, Colson Whitehead, whose novel The Underground Railroad was filmed by Amazon Prime, will talk about the latest instalment of his new crime series, and days after Season 2 of her Netflix smash Heartstopper airs on the streaming giant, Alice Osman will discuss her much-loved novels. Wrongdoing will also be on the agenda when Katrin Jakobsdottir hits pause on her day job, she's Prime Minister of Iceland, to discuss the lockdown crime novel she has written with Ragnar Jonasson, creator of the Dark Iceland series. First Minister Humza Yousaf will interview Hashi Mohammed, who arrived in Britain as an unaccompanied child refugee from Kenya and is now one of the UK's leading housing barristers. Meanwhile, Mr Yousaf's predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon, will chair an interview with Booker Prize-winning New Zealand author Eleanor Catton about her new novel Burnham Wood, and take part in a tribute to Salman Rushdie. Addressing Ms Sturgeon's recent arrest and subsequent release without charge in the ongoing investigation into SNP finances, Mr Barley said, "Any author in the programme may be subject to something which may change their plans. All I'd say about Nicola Sturgeon is that I agree that people are innocent until proven guilty in law, and I see no reason why one should uninvite someone who is helping police with their inquiries." Other politicians due to appear include Ruth Davidson, Wes Streeting MP, and former Scottish Labour leader Kezia Dugdale. Among this year's festival innovations is Think Tank, a strand in which food and drink are served and audiences are asked to eat together. Letters of Hope, the premiere of a film about an alternative school set up by Spartans Community Football Academy and the Edinburgh Reader Bank. It is a partnership with Durham University to investigate the relationship between reading, imagination and mental health, and is itself the result of a £9 million grant from the Wellcome Trust. Mr Barley's successor as director is to be announced soon, possibly as early as next week. By Barry Didcott.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 16th of June 2023, from the news section, Boris Johnson in clear breach of rules over new job with Daily Mail. Report by Tom Gordon, political editor. Boris Johnson has been accused of yet more rule breaking after taking a job as a newspaper columnist without consulting Whitehall's appointments watchdog. The former Prime Minister committed a clear breach of the rules according to the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments, ACOBA. Former ministers and senior civil servants are supposed to seek advice before starting a new job within 2 years of leaving their position. Mr Johnson, who was ousted from Downing Street last July, gave ACOBA just 30 minutes notice today before announcing he had already been hired by the Daily Mail. He is expected to earn a 6-figure salary for a weekly column. In a promotional video, he said it would be completely unexpurgated stuff, with politics featuring as little as possible. ACOBA's spokesman said this was a clear breach of its rules, however, there is no sanction. A spokesperson for Boris Johnson said the former PM had been in touch with ACOBA and claimed the normal process is being followed. It comes just a day after a damning report by the Commons Privilege Committee found Mr Johnson guilty of repeated contempts of Parliament by deliberately misleading MPs. It was the first time a former Prime Minister had been found to have lied to Parliament. The committee recommended his 90-day suspension from Parliament, a punishment he escaped by resigning as an MP after seeking its provisional conclusions. However, it also said Mr Johnson should be denied the access pass given to Parliament, given to former MPs, which would affect him. The Commons is due to debate the findings on Monday, and MPs had been expected to take part in a contested vote on whether to endorse the report. But with growing Tory splits between Mr Johnson's supporters and those who believe he deserves to be condemned, there may not be a vote after all. Instead, the substantive motion to approve the report may be nodded through after Mr Johnson privately urged his supporters not to oppose it. This would spare both him and Rishi Sunak embarrassment. The Prime Minister does not want any infighting in the spotlight, while Mr Johnson knows that a vote would expose the underwhelming number of MPs who actually support him. However, Labour and other opposition parties could try to force a vote in order to push Tory MPs into putting on record whether they support or oppose the report. The sanctions proposed by the Tory Majority Committee will pass regardless, with only a relatively small group of Johnson's loyalists who would oppose the report's findings. The SNP urged Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross to grow a backbone and whip his 6-strong MP group to back the report, but he refused. And that report was by political editor Tom Gordon. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 16th of June 2023, from the news section, Dalshangan Forest, fire crews continues to battle blaze. Report by Jodie Harrison. Firefighters have worked for almost 24 hours tackling a wildfire in Dumfries Galloway. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, SFRS, first received reports of a wildfire within Dalshangan Forest near Castle Douglas at around 1 p.m. on Thursday. Firefighters remain on the scene working to extinguish the blaze, which is the latest large wildfire in Scotland in recent weeks. A wildfire warning is in place across the country as the hot and dry weather continues. Earlier this month, a wildfire took hold and burned for almost 2 weeks in Cannock, near Inverness, and this is thought could have been the UK's largest ever wildfire. Last week, another wildfire ignited in Daviot, also in the Highlands. On Thursday, SFRS issued its 4th wildfire warning in 3 weeks, stressing even a small flame could spark a blaze in the current dry conditions. The North West Highlands have been given a very high rating of wildfire risk, while all other areas of Scotland are at extreme risk level. The warning runs from Thursday until Saturday, but could be extended if the warm weather continues. Fire Service Group Commander Niall McLennan said, "We are urging the public not to light disposable barbecues or campfires in areas where there is vegetation, much of which is tinder dry, or to discard cigarettes carelessly. As the warm and dry weather continues, so too does the risk of wildfire. The recent wildfire incidents at Cannock and Daviot, near Inverness, and Campsie Fells, just north of Glasgow, show just how large these fires can become. It would only take a small ignition on dry vegetation to cause a wildfire at this time of year. Please follow the Scottish Outdoor Access Code if you're heading into the countryside this weekend, as the wildfire warning continues." And that report was by Jodie Harrison. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 16th of June 2023, from the news section, warning scrapping S4 exams would impact work rate and motivation. Report by David Ball. A group of education experts has warned SNP ministers against scrapping exams for S4 pupils, amid concern it would have a seriously negative impact on work rate and motivation. The Commission on School Reform, an independent group of education experts set up by the think tank Reform Scotland, has released a new challenge paper on assessment and qualification in Scotland schools. A report into exams and assessments in Scotland by Professor Louise Hayward is due to be published soon and is expected to suggest scrapping exams in S4. The Commission's paper, written by the former President of School Leaders Scotland, Carol Ford, a former head teacher of Kilmarnock Academy, warns that assessment at the end of S4 serves a different purpose to assessment in S5/S6. The document provides analysis on progress so far clarifies strengths and weaknesses, and offers a useful guide to fruitful routes to progress. Instead of scrapping the exam diet for S4 pupils, the paper outlines a series of recommendations which it claims can be implemented now, maintaining the importance of assessment in S6, whilst also allowing additional learning time in S5. The group's recommendations include separating the S4 assessment system from that of S5 and S6, shortening the S4 assessment timetable, and lengthening by one term the higher assessment timetable, and using external assessment data to moderate internal grades. Ms. Ford said, "Assessment in S4 improves motivation and work rate throughout S3/S4. The removal of external assessment at the end of National 4 courses has had a seriously negative impact on work rate and motivation, as many teachers will attest. On the other hand, assessment in S5/S6 leads to endpoint qualifications which offer entry to higher education, training or employment opportunities. There is no logical reason to tie these two assessment processes together. There are undoubtedly many problems in our exam system, and Scottish pupils cannot continue to be subjected to a narrow, formulaic assessment system. A system which also fails to motivate a significant minority of pupils, exacerbating the serious behavioural issues in our schools." The Commission on School Reform's paper highlights opportunities to reform the exam system now, immediately alleviating some of the most serious concerns. We can and should take action now in the processes that we, as teachers, know are causing problems. If we fail to do so, we fail yet more of Scotland's children. SNP Education Secretary General Gilruth has suggested radical change is needed to modernise Scotland's qualification system. Ms Gilruth told the BBC there was a need to future-proof our qualifications, adding that the exam programme they may look radically different in the future. The Scottish Qualifications Authority, SQA, which runs exams, is set to be broken up after a report warned there was too much focus on exams in schools. A new body is to be established alongside the replacement for Education Scotland, while a separate school inspections agency will also be formed. And that report was by David Ball. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 16th of June 2023, from the sports section. Hibs complete transfer signing of Kevin Nisbet replacement, by Ian Collin. Hibernian have made experienced striker Adam Le Fondre their first summer signing as they prepare for life without Scotland internationalist Kevin Nisbet. The 36-year-old is returning to British football in an initial 12-month deal with the option of another year, following 5 seasons at the Australian A-League with Sydney FC. The former Wolves, Bolton Wanderers and Cardiff City marksman is well known to new Hibs director of football Brian McDermott, who was his manager when Reading reached the English Premier League in 2012. Hibs are in need of attacking reinforcements following the sale of Nisbet to Millwall, as well as the departure of 37-year-old former Celtic winger Aidan McGeady. The Easter Road outfit will look to Le Fondre to add his experience to manager Lee Johnson's squad, as well as his proven scoring prowess. Johnson said, "Adam brings craft to our new front line, and his experience and nous in the game will help develop our younger strikers. Throughout his career he has a proven goal scoring record and physically he's in good shape. We look forward to working with him." Le Fondre scored 12 times in 34 top flight outings during Reading's season in the Premier League, but could not help prevent the Royals from dropping back into the Championship. He was subsequently a signing target for Neil Lennon at Hibs in 2018, but opted instead for a move down under, where he netted 56 times in 97 A-League appearances to sit second in Sydney's all-time goal scorers list. However, he was not offered a new deal with the Sky Blues and spoke earlier this week of seeking a new challenge. He said on his departure from Sydney, "My time with Sydney FC has been fantastic. It has been a joy to work with every player and member of staff and to play in front of our fabulous members and fans. I would have loved to have stayed and gone on to break Alec Brosquet's goal scoring record at Sydney FC. However, understand the club wants to make a change. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have played here and to have been so successful, and I look forward to a new challenge in my career." Le Fondre, who turned 37 in December, has scored 273 goals in 694 appearances across his career. and that report was by Ian Collin. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 16th of June 2023, in the sports section, Sam Lammers addresses Rangers' goal target and details Beale influence. Report by Christopher Jack. Michael Beale has put in the hours and collected the air miles in search of reinforcements this summer to build a Rangers squad capable of clinching the Premiership title. Now Sam Lammers must repay his boss in goals and silverware after putting pen to paper in a 4-year deal at Ibrox and becoming the first addition to the attacking arsenal this term. Beale has wasted little time in overhauling the group that finished last season with nothing to show for their efforts. There is, of course, plenty of room for improvement individually and collectively. Lammers arrives in Glasgow with a sizable price tag on his head and lofty demands to meet. He also has questions to answer even before a ball has been kicked. Supporters have been quick to cast doubt over his suitability for the Rangers forward line after a campaign that saw him score just twice in Serie A during unsuccessful loan spells with Empoli and Sampdoria. Such a return will not be accepted now that he is spearheading Beale's side in their pursuit of titles and trophies. The 26-year-old is quick enough and smart enough to acknowledge that himself. I know for a striker the main target is to score a lot of goals, and I know I can do that also, Lammers said. I'm aware that it is a big part of being a striker, and this is also my goal at Rangers, but I am not a typical striker who's only hanging inside the box for 1 or 2 chances. I want to help the team. I can drop out of the striker position. With my height, you might expect me to be a target man, but that's not what I am. But I am aware of the fact that I want to score more goals again. I know I have it in me. In periods I've scored a lot of goals, and in the last couple of years, not so much, even though in the clubs I was at it was not easy to get a lot of chances. I think the attacking style of Rangers fits me. Of course, Rangers have to win every game, especially in the league, so I think this fits me as a player really well. The numbers may not paint the brightest picture of Lammers, but Beale has clearly seen enough over the last 6 months to convince him the former PSV Eindhoven star can shine at Ibrox. Lammers spent last term fighting relegation in Serie A. Empoli eventually finished 14th, but Sampdoria collected just 19 points and scored just 24 goals from a barren 38 game campaign. The striker finds himself in a very different situation now, and the chance to win matches and challenge for titles is one that must bring out the best in the giant striker. I think I need this, to be honest, Lammers told Sky Sports. The last time I had it was when I was at PSV when we were fighting for the title. It was a good experience to win it one time. But this pressure is different. We have to win every game. Of course, at every team I've been at, you try to win every game, but the pressure for clubs at the lower end of the table are different. As a top athlete, this is the best you can get. That you have to win every game, and you can fight for the top places, and that is what we are going to do this year. The deals for Kieran Dowell, Dujon Sterling and Jack Buckland were all Bosman switches, but the move for Lammers has seen Rangers outlay more than £3 million to sign the striker from Atalanta. It is a significant investment for Beale. His faith in Lammers has been long-standing, and the Dutchman has never doubted he is now at the right club and working for the right manager. From the moment I had my contact with Rangers, and it was with the trainer, I had a good feeling about it, Lammers said after signing on the dotted line on Thursday. They sold me the club, but of course I knew the history of the club and how big it is. This is known everywhere in the world. I got a presentation about the club and how I could fit into it. For me, the personal side is really important, so I got a good feeling about that and I was really excited. It was a few months ago that I got in contact with Michael. He came over to Italy to see me and explained everything that I had to know about the club and how he saw me fit into the club. From that moment I've been excited. We've kept in contact and luckily it's gone quite smoothly. In the last few years I have been changing clubs a lot, always on the last day of the transfer period when the season has already started. But luckily now I can start pre-season here, so I think this is a big plus. It was really big. The first contact from the club was with the manager. He took the time to come to Italy, and for me and many players, I think this personal side of things is really important and doesn't happen so much in football. This shows the confidence in me and their willingness to get me into the club. So, from that moment, I hoped that everything would work out, and now I'm here. And that report was by Christopher Jack. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 16th of June 2023, from the sports section. Exceptional, Gino Mader dies aged 26 after crash at Tour de Suisse. Report by Ian Parker. Swiss cyclist Gino Mader has died at the age of 26 as the result of injuries suffered in a crash at the Tour de Suisse on Thursday, the Bahrain Victorious team has announced. Mader was involved in a high-speed crash in the descent of the Albula Pass late in stage 6 of the race, along with American Magnus Sheffield, with both riders falling into a ravine. Mader had been found motionless in the water according to a race statement, before being resuscitated by race doctors at the scene and airlifted to hospital in Chur. However, Mader lost his fight for life on Friday morning. It is with deep sadness and heavy hearts that we have to announce the passing of Gino Mader, a team statement said. On Friday 16th of June, following a very serious crash during stage 5 of the Tour de Suisse, Gino lost his battle to recover from the severe injuries he sustained. Our entire team is devastated by this tragic accident, and our thoughts and prayers are with Gino's family and loved ones during this incredibly difficult time. Following the high-speed incident which occurred on the final descent of Thursday's stage, the 26-year-old was resuscitated at the scene by medical staff who performed CPR before being airlifted to hospital. Despite the best efforts of the phenomenal staff at Chur Hospital, Gino couldn't make it through this, his final and biggest challenge, and at 11:30am, we said goodbye to one of the shining lights of our team. Sheffield, 21, suffered a concussion and soft tissue damage in the crash and was kept in hospital overnight for observation, the Ineos Grenadiers said. Mader, who won a stage of the Giro d'Italia in 2021 and came second overall at the Tour de Romandie last year, was a hugely popular rider in the peloton, and news of his death led to an outpouring of tributes. Geraint Thomas wrote on Twitter, "I can't believe what I'm reading. Such a sad, sad day. Thoughts with everyone who knew and loved Gino." Former world champion Alejandro Valverde wrote, "There are no words. Terrible news. My support and love to his colleagues and @BHR Victorious, as well as family and friends." Bahrain Victorious Managing Director, Milan Ertzen, said the team wanted to race on in Mader's honour. "We are devastated by the loss of an exceptional cyclist, Gino Mader," he said. "His talent, dedication and enthusiasm were an inspiration to us all. Not only was he an extremely talented cyclist, but a great person off the bike. We extend our deepest condolences to his family and loved ones, and our thoughts are with them during this difficult time. Bahrain Victorious will race in his honour, keeping his memory in every road we race. We are determined to show the spirit and passion Gino displayed, and he will always remain an integral part of our team." Race organisers said a doctor was at the scene of the crash within 2 minutes of it happening. It occurred with 14 kilometres of the 211km stage from Fieschi to La Punt remaining. After the incident, there was immediately criticism of a route that ended with a fast, technical descent off the mountain to the finish line. Former professional Adam Hansen, now president of the Cyclist Union, the CPA, wrote on Twitter on Thursday night that such finishes were a concern for riders, and said he has been working on a presentation to put the governing body, the UCI, and race organisers to better ensure rider safety. And that report was by Ian Parker.
From the Herald, Monday, 19th of June 2023. Sports section. Spain beat Croatia on penalties to win Nations League final. By Herald Sport Online. Spain held their nerve to win the UEFA Nations League final by beating Croatia 5-4 on penalties after a goalless 120 minutes in Rotterdam. Real Madrid defender Dani Carvalho converted the winning spot kick after Spain goalkeeper Unai Simon had saved efforts from Croatia's Lovro Maher and Bruno Pekčević. Spain's triumph saw them seal a fifth major trophy and become the second nation after France to have won the World Cup, European Championship and the Nations League. Manchester City player Rodri and Aymeric Laporte, who scored and missed for Spain respectively in the shootout, have won a fourth major trophy of the season. Croatia, who beat the Netherlands 4-2 after extra time in their semi-final on Wednesday, have been hoping to win their first major tournament. Spain did not have one shot on target in a poor first half of regulation time, while Laporte's last-ditch tackle thwarted Andre Kamaric and Ivan Perisic's header forced Simon into a diving save. Spain went close in the 58th minute when Marco Asensio headed their best chance, up to then just over the overlapping Jordi Alba's cross. Croatia responded through Mario Pasalik's header after another ball in from Petric before Spain stepped it up, with Fabian Ruiz's chipped effort and Asensio's shot on the turn both going close. Spain went closest to breaking the deadlock in the 86th minute when Perisic blocked Ansu Fati's shot on the goal line following fellow substitute Mikel Merino's cutback. Croatia's substitute Meher was also denied by last-ditch defending as his shot after a counter-attack was blocked by Nacho in the first period of extra time. Spain threw caution to the wind in the second period and finished the game on top. Dani Olmo and Asensio had shots deflected for a corner, and Rodri's effort was blocked as the third Nations League final went to penalties, with Carvajal converting a nerveless winner. Earlier on Sunday, Italy beat the Netherlands 3-2 in the third place playoff in Enschede. Roberto Mancini's side, who sealed Nation League bronze for the second tournament running, made a flying start as Federico Di Marco and David Fratesi put them 2-0 up in 20 minutes. Steven Bergwijn reduced the deficit for the Netherlands midway through the second half, but Federico Chiesa struck Italy's third 4 minutes later. Georginio Wijnaldum ensured a nervy finale with the Netherlands' second goal in the 89th minute, but it was not enough to prevent a third defeat in 4 games under boss Ronald Koeman in his second stint in charge. That article was by Herald Sports Online. From the Herald, Monday the 19th of June 2023, Sports section. Steve Clarke Scotland critics now eating their words along with humble pie, by Graham McGarry, senior sports writer. I'm beginning to think that Steve Clarke might just know what he's doing. No offence to Kenny McLean, good player as he is and fine career that he's had, but I can't have been the only one to question Clarke's reasoning behind putting the Norwich City midfielder on a Scotland trail by a goal, heading into the final stages of a largely uninspiring performance against Norway. Or to be wholly truthful, I can't have been the only one to shout, "What the hell are you doing?" at the telly, and it wasn't without reason. McLean had scored just once before in his Scotland career against San Marino, and had hit just 1 goal for Norwich last season against Rotherham United. Soon after losing the plot, at that change, though we were all losing the place, as McLean stroked home a beautiful finish, just moments after Lyndon Dykes had hauled Scotland level, winning the game and surely securing passage to the European Championships in Germany next year. Despite an incredible record as Scotland manager, Clarke's side have won 13, drawn 1 and lost just 2 of their last 16 competitive games. He has had his critics over the course of his tenure. And just as for that fleeting moment on Saturday evening, I have at times been among them. When his team put in a dismal showing away to Denmark in a game they lost by 2 going on 10, and he played Andy Robertson at right back, I wondered if it was getting his starting 11 wrong and having to remedy it during the course of the match was becoming an unwelcome habit on the back of a disappointing Euros campaign. His team roared back from that setback though, and put in perhaps the most complete Scottish performance in decades when they beat Denmark by the same score at Hampden. Then came last June with the 2 demoralising defeats to Ukraine and the Republic of Ireland that first ended our World Cup hopes, and then threatened to derail our Nations League campaign, the crucial insurance policy that allowed Clarke to end our major tournament hoodoo in the first place. Again, his team responded, not only recovering to top their Nations League section and pocket a playoff for the Euros, but by racking up 3 wins at the start of this qualifying campaign, including a sensational defeat of Spain. That will likely render their fallback position redundant. So yes, Clarke has at times made missteps, but quite apart from his excellent overall record, it is the mentality he has instilled in this Scotland squad that acts as a towering testament to the job he has done. And let's not overlook the way he has altered his tactics to give his players the opportunity to come back and win on Saturday evening. At the same time, as he had the Tartan Army questioning his sanity for sending McLean on. The substitution was part of a rejig, bringing Ryan Porteous off and moving from the defensive 3-4-2-1 to a 4-2-3-1, allowing John McGinn to abandon his rearguard duties and concentrate on getting in touch with the tireless Dykes, with McLean linking up with that pair from the left. He responded not only to the scoreline, but the actions of opposition coach Stal Solbakken. Having removed Erling Haaland, he removed much of the threat that Scotland could be caught on the counter. Seeing that opening, Clark twisted the knife and ultimately all but killed Norway as a competitor in this section. There may well be a section of fans who will never warm to Clark as Scotland manager, and let's be candid, most of those are Rangers supporters whose noses are still out of joint after the frequent spats he had with the Ibrox side fans when he was Kilmarnock boss. Contrary to widespread belief, Rangers fans make up a large proportion of the Scotland fan base, and many of those supporters have already managed to put those old rivalries behind them and enjoy the success of the Scotland team, no matter who is in the dugout. It's a shame for those who cannot, though, because they are missing out on a golden era of the national side that has largely been Clark's construction. I and many others, as long as we don't do the most Scotland thing possible and now lose to Georgia at home, will be more than happy to eat our humble pie and continue to savour the fare that Clark and his team are serving up to us. Just as his team's character is proof positive of the job he has done, so too will a packed Hampden Park tomorrow night. And should Scotland be a goal down going into the closing stages and Clark comes to his bench to send on Greg Taylor up top, I might just keep my opinions to myself until the final whistle. That article was by Graham McGarry.
This article is from the Herald on Monday the 19th of June 2023. It is from the opinion section and the headline is, "It's a bad policy to skimp on travel insurance." The author is Doug Marr. It's just over a year since our holiday from hell. A few days into a break in Gran Canaria, I became very ill. Immediate life-saving surgery was required, but hey, I had platinum travel insurance with a reputable company. Medical costs up to $3 million were covered, so what could go wrong? Plenty, as it turned out. Initially, I was diagnosed at a private clinic. A payment of €500 was required before being allowed to sit down. Things went downhill from there. The surgeon, scalpel in hand, credit card machine in the other, informed me the cost would be €25,000. It quickly became apparent, $3 million cover or not, our insurers were balking at the cost. At 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, my increasingly frantic and distraught wife was asked to obtain 2 years' medical records from our GP practice in Aberdeen. At the end of the day, the insurers got the result they were probably looking for. The surgeon decided things had become critical and I was moved to the nearest public hospital, 40 miles away. The life-saving surgery was carried out around midnight. The Association of British Insurers reports its members deal with around 500,000 travel-related claims each year. Around half the $400 million cost is for emergency medical treatment. The Post Office also reports that large numbers of travellers consciously skimp on insurance. An unbelievable 22% travelled completely uninsured, while 27% went without the correct cover. Why do people do it? Some might say I had a super-duper policy and a fat lot of good it did me. To be fair to our insurers, they did get us home and we were able to claim back considerable sums for post-operation medication and other expenses. Left to our own devices, it would have been a challenge to get home. For example, obtaining the crucial fitness to fly paperwork. Cost is certainly a factor when travellers chance their luck. Sure, insurance can be expensive, but not when set against the overall cost of a holiday. Never having a problem on umpteen previous holidays doesn't protect you from disaster on your next. There's truth in the saying, if you can't afford insurance, you can't afford the trip. Some see the UK Global Health Insurance Card, GHIC, as a medical get-out-of-jail-free card. True, its predecessor, the EHIC, entitled me to surgery and hospitalisation in Gran Canaria, but it's never enough in itself, only providing baseline treatment at local level. It doesn't meet the cost of repatriation, dead or alive, lost luggage and cancellation. Nevertheless, it's still worth having one and taking it with you. As the holiday season approaches, there has been the usual crop of horror stories, the scariest being the elderly Scot who suffered a heart attack and stroke in the US. With hospital costs approaching $1 million, his insurance company played hardball, citing an undeclared pre-existing medical condition. My GP has personal experience of someone selling their house to meet non-insured overseas medical costs. Lesson 1. Tell your insurers absolutely everything in your medical records. A cheap option, such as cover via a bank account or credit card, might seem attractive. Caveat emptor. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. For example, does it cover all family members, and for what? Money expert Martin Lewis provides excellent advice on travel insurance. One of his strongest recommendations is to read your policy very carefully. Yes, I know it's boring, but it's certainly worth the effort. Many who wouldn't normally bungee jump, scuba dive, or ride a moped find them irresistible on holiday. Careful reading of the small print on their policy might dampen their enthusiasm. Some policies are even invalidated if a mishap is alcohol related. Falling down the taverna steps, perhaps? As we found out, you only discover how good your policy really is when making a claim. It's also true many insurers actively seek ways of denying claims or paying out as little as possible. Nevertheless, as the Along Dusty Roads website warns, anyone who doesn't buy travel insurance really is an idiot. Happy holidays. That report was by Doug Marr. This article is from the Herald on Monday the 19th of June 2023. It's from the opinion section and the headline is "The 34% of Scotland I do not understand and never will." And the report is by Mark Smith. The question that kept occurring to me last week when I spent the afternoon in Uddingston after Nicola Sturgeon's arrest was, what effect will it all have? The people I spoke to in the town where Miss Sturgeon has a house seemed remarkably unmoved by the news and reluctant to shift their votes. It felt to me that the plates should be shifting, that there should be movement under my feet, the rumble of change. But instead, silence, stasis. It looks like I was wrong though, or maybe just talking to the wrong people. A new panel-based poll for the Sunday Times, the first poll since Miss Sturgeon's arrest, suggests support for the SNP has fallen to 34%, a drop of 5 points compared to Panelbase's last poll in March, putting them level with Labour, whose vote share is up by 3. Translated into seats, it would mean Labour get 26 MPs and defeat the SNP for the first time since 2010. I'm tempted to say, woohoo, ha ha, how funny, but saying woohoo, ha ha, how funny would be childish, and Mummy tells me not to be childish. I'm also aware of the effect that the last 10 years has had on me, and you too probably. Before 2014, I would never have considered myself tribal or national or political particularly, but the fact that we were forced to pick a trench, the muddy trench of yes or the muddy trench of no, meant a pretty fundamental change in the way Scottish politics worked, which we may only now be emerging from. It's important, obviously, to keep all of this in perspective, which is clearly what the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar is trying to do. Responding to the poll, Mr Sarwar said he thought it indicated Labour had momentum, but there was still a hell of a lot of work to do. He also insisted his party was not complacent. This is definitely the right approach, particularly for Labour, which is still living in the long shadow of Neil Kinnock's We're All Right cock-up in 1992. Lesson: do not party too soon. It's also striking how the fortunes of Miss Sturgeon and Boris Johnson have changed since the last general election in 2019, driven in a large part by Brexit. What we saw back then was that many, if not most, of the English voters who supported the Conservatives in traditionally Labour areas did so because they wanted to see Brexit happen. And many, if not most, of the Scottish voters who supported the SNP in traditionally Conservative or Labour areas did so because they wanted to see Brexit stopped. It also meant that Sturgeon and Johnson, although in opposition to each other, looked unstoppable. But it's only now, I think, that we can see that the seeds of the current situation were already planted in 2019. Many of the voters who supported the SNP then did so because they saw it as a practical way to stop Brexit or because they saw the SNP and Sturgeon in particular as competent. However, many of those voters, and I know this because I spoke to lots of them, were also still opposed to or suspicious about independence, and they agonised over whether voting SNP was the right thing to do. In that sense, 2019 wasn't the beginning of a surge for the SNP, it was the high point. And so it has proved. The SNP won 45% of the vote in 2019, but is now some 11 points lower than that because some of the voters who have lent their vote to the SNP are now returning to the other parties or have already done so. Partly, this is because Brexit no longer has the power it once had as an issue to drive voter behaviour, but it's also because it's no longer credible to see the SNP as competent. Look at the list, dear boy. Ferries, deposit return scheme, gender reform, ferries, drug deaths, waiting times, ferries, ferries, ferries. The latest poll is undoubtedly a reflection of all these factors, but what it also appears to show is that the movement to Labour that's happening among the softer SNP supporters has probably been underway for some time, and the shift that's been happening more recently is occurring almost entirely among harder yes supporters. This is where it really starts to bite for the SNP, I'm afraid. Bits are falling off the rock face, and the obvious conclusion is that the phrase, "You're under arrest, Miss Sturgeon," was the final straw for some people. The fact her personal ratings have also tanked would appear to bear this out. But what's also striking about this latest poll is what hasn't changed, even now, and the fact that 34% of people are apparently still willing to vote SNP. You can see a similar phenomenon in England, where some 28% of voters still intend to support the Tories, and I'm tempted to say, who are these people and what on earth will it take? The answer, probably, is that politics has always been like this. There is a streak of society that is loyal to a particular party and always will be, whatever the circumstances. As someone who has voted for all the parties at least once and happens to think that's the best way to do things, I do not understand it, and I don't think I ever will. However, the bigger point here is that the hardcore, and I spoke to a few of them in Uddingston, who said that Miss Sturgeon's arrest would make no difference to their support for the SNP, don't in the end determine the result. For decades there was a hardcore vote for Labour in Scotland, and now there's a hardcore for the SNP in Scotland and the Tories in England. But no one's in much doubt that the SNP and the Tories will do badly at the next general election. Anas Sarwar and Scottish Labour are right to be excited about all of this, I am too. But Mr. Sarwar is also right to be cautious and wary of being complacent, because it's clear that the hardcore will stay hardcore and he'll be relying on the much softer middle of voters who are more likely to be influenced by events. Will they switch back to the SNP in great numbers before the election? It seems unlikely. But Labour supporters know their history, and they know that the party took its vote for granted in Scotland for a very long time. It was one of the reasons it collapsed. They must also know that it's important, especially now when things are looking good, that they do not make the same mistake again. That report was by Mark Smith.
Herald Scotland recorded on Monday 19th of June 2023. Arts and Entertainments, A Life in Songs, The Beach Boys in Their Own Words as we celebrate Brian Wilson, by Gabriel Mackay, journalist. When asked to name a band they associate with summer, most people, regardless of age, are likely to point to the Beach Boys. Their breezy harmonic music is perfect for a sitting in the sun, sipping a cocktail. They've even got beach in their name, for crying out loud. On Tuesday, co-founder of the Beach Boys, and the man largely recognised as the driving force behind their early work, Brian Wilson, turns 81. In this week's Life in Songs, we take a look at the band's long career as we attempt to tell their story through their own songs, as well as highlighting some of their influences which can still be felt today. Surfin', 1961. There's something of a theme to the early Beach Boys LPs, the first three of which are called Surfin' Safari, Surfin' USA and Surfer Girl. The band's first single fits the theme nicely, though no one can even agree who really wrote it. It's fair to say the group weren't making waves yet. Surfin' USA 1963. The real breakthrough came with another surfing song, a reworked and rewritten version of Chuck Berry's Sweet 16. It became the Beach Boys' first top 10 hit and remains one of their best known songs and is featured in everything from Rush Hour to Teen Wolf. I Get Around, All Summer Long, 1964. If Surfin' USA brought unexpected success, then I Get Around was the reaction. My Buddies and Me are getting real well known. The song was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2017 and has been covered by groups as varied as Pennywise, 10 Masked Men and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. California Girls, Summer Days and Summer Nights, 1965. Allegedly conceived by Wilson the first time he took LSD, he himself has named it as the quintessential Beach Boys song. As with many of their tracks, its authorship is disputed. Mike Love was awarded a songwriting credit in 1990 after a legal battle, and said he wrote every syllable aside from I Wish They Could All Be California Girls. Wouldn't It Be Nice? Pet Sounds, 1965. There are very few who would argue with the assertion that Pet Sounds was the Beach Boys' high point. It's frequently cited as one of the first concept albums, meaning The Wall, Ziggy Stardust, American Idiot and Good Kid, Mad City can trace their lineage back to it. Wouldn't It Be Nice was recorded with 16 studio musicians and took close to 3 months to complete. God Only Knows, Pet Sounds, 1966. The definitive song in the band's definitive album, Paul McCartney described it as the greatest song ever written, Bono as Fact and Proof of Angels, and Barry Gibb pointed to God Only Knows as what the Bee Gees had been trying to get close to for their entire career. Heroes and Villains, Smiley Smile, 1967. By the late 1960s, the Beach Boys were deeply uncool, so much so that it was rumoured their decision to pull out of the Monterey Pop Festival at the last minute was to avoid comparison to the likes of The Who and the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Hendrix himself described Heroes and Villains as a psychedelic barbershop quartet, and Smiley Smile was panned by contemporary critics. Don't Go Near the Water, Surf's Up, 1971. The group would eventually return to critical and commercial acclaim, just as they returned to the surfing theme. Surf's Up saw the band take a more activist stance with Don't Go Near the Water, telling the listener not to surf due to the polluted state of the water. Endless Harmony, Keeping the Summer Alive, 1980. Conflict within the group and Brian Wilson's struggles with mental ill health saw the Beach Boys listless as the 1980s dawned. Keeping the Summer Alive, the last album to be recorded with Dennis Wilson before his death by drowning, is generally accepted as the nadir, but this song, the final track, has something of the old magic. Summer's Gone, That's Why God Made the Radio, 2012. Almost certainly the last ever Beach Boys album. That's Why God Made the Radio is a fitting epitaph, if not quite reaching the heights of the group's best work. Summer's Gone, with Brian Wilson on lead vocals, is easily the best thing on it and ends with the lines, "We laugh, we cry, we live, then die, and dream about our yesterday." Bonus. Wilson and the Beach Boys' influence in popular music is still apparent today. Here are 5 songs that wouldn't have existed without him. Paperback Writer, The Beatles, 1966. The Beatles and the Beach Boys had something of a rivalry in the 1960s, but a respectful one. Back in the USSR, directly lifts from California Girls in the Bridge, and McCartney said Paperback Writer was consciously written to sound like Wilson and co. Rockaway Beach, The Ramones, 1977. The Ramones are among those who have cited Brian Wilson and co. as an influence, and D.D. Ramone consciously looked to emulate the Beach Boys on this cut from Rocket to Russia. Sparky's Dream, Teenage Fan Club, 1995. The Beach Boys are credited as pioneers of the power pop genre, and you won't find many better examples than this track by Bells Hill's own Teenage Fan Club. Island in the Sun, Weezer, 2001. Rivers Cuomo and co. have been open about the foundational influence of the Beach Boys on Weezer, and even named a song after the group after them in 2017's Pacific Daydream. Their best Beach Boys with distortion moment came in the form of Island in the Sun, though. Feeling This, Blink-182, 2003. Blink-182 probably aren't the first band you think of when somebody says the Beach Boys, but bassist Mark Hoppus has named Pet Sounds as his favourite album, and you can hear their influence in the chorus harmonies of this career highlight. By Gabriel Mackay. That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, tune, review, and tell your friends about our service.